Well, welcome to my channel. This is TVJ's YouTube channel. You're all part of the YouTube crowd. Obviously you're watching on YouTube. Um, I decided kind of at the last minute to do a live stream, and this is that live stream. Um, Basically, I'm going to talk about what exactly a TV engineer does for a living, since I am one. My lighting seems weird all of a sudden. So hopefully you have some questions, or you've always wanted to know what a TV engineer actually does for a living. Hopefully my audio is good. I'm trying out a new microphone I got. I realized in the last stream that there was some echo, so I'm hoping to eliminate that echo with this new microphone. I do have the chat up, and let me pop it on the screen. So I do have the chat working. Joe from Controlling is here. He says hello. And the audio is great, which is good, especially for a TV engineer, making sure that the audio and video both work. As that is one of the things a TV engineer does for a living, is to make sure the TV station is actually operating properly. Rebecca Baldwin is also here and says the audio is good. Joe asks, what is the blue cable? The blue cable is a XLR cable. I believe it's from Belden is the brand. So this is basically a no-name microphone from Amazon that I found. It's connected to an XLR cable on a boom mic. It goes over to a little Audio Arts USB preamplifier that then goes down to my computer, which is in this cabinet down here, and all goes through OBS, which is how I'm streaming to YouTube. Some floor noise. Wonder what that's from. I did some recordings earlier and didn't notice anything, but that doesn't mean anything. It's really weird, I will admit. It's really weird to be on this side of the camera and also trying to do engineering, because you can't really listen to yourself at the same time that you're hooking it up. I'm used to be on that side of the camera. I've actually, as of tomorrow, fun fact, worked at my current station for 18 years as of tomorrow. I've been in television for 19 years now, professionally. I started back in college in BGSU, is where I went to school. I got my degree in telecommunications. I graduated in 2006, but prior to 2006, I already had worked in television for 3 years. Most of that was full-time, actually. I was only part-time for about a year and a half, maybe, something like that. So, so just let's go back to the chat real quick, just so I think it's funny. Joe says the cable looks like a 12 gauge digicord. No, it's XLR, but it's professional grade Belden. This is some of the cable we use at work. And it's designed to be used over and over and over again in the field. Therefore, it's extra insulated and extra rugged. Rebecca says the noise is gone now, which is good. I'm guessing that was back at what year we were talking about. Or no, it's probably the 18 years of television. Rebecca and I actually used to work together at one point and go to school together. And yes, Joe, I guess I technically am getting old. Aren't we all, though? I mean, every day we get older. So, sorry, it's kind of warm in here. So the first question is that Joe would love to hear what your week is like. Do you support live broadcast? So yes, my week is, I'm technically the IT manager for a TV station, and I'm intentionally being vague, just so you know. I'm the IT manager, so my job is basically to make sure everything is up and running. All the computers or systems we use are running. Most of my daily activities are basically troubleshooting end user issues, but it is also doing patching, and security is a big deal. If you don't know, there have already been 2 broadcasters in the last year or so that have been hacked, and we're off the air because of that. So my company takes security extremely, they take it, it's every day. It's just drilled into us, security, security, security. And so a lot of my job is dealing with security related issues in terms of patching and whatnot. I do more computer stuff than I honestly kind of wish I did. I'm not really an IT person per se. I didn't go to school for that. I never wanted to be a computer person because I never wanted to sit at a desk. I wanted to be out and doing things, getting my hands dirty, whatnot. Actually, um, so I grew up around television. My dad was a TV engineer for 42 years, I believe it was, until he retired a couple years ago. So I grew up around television. Now he worked at PBS, the public broadcasting system, and so it was different form of television, but it was great because I got to go in with him. And commercial stations don't usually let their kids come in and hang out with them, but a PBS station did. So I grew up, walking into a TV station and knowing what terms like master control meant and what a control room was. And I knew that when you walked into a studio, you kept quiet because the microphones were probably live, or if they weren't, you still were quiet because it's a TV studio. So I grew up around television. I love television, and so I, of course, chose to go into television. And went to school for television. Fun fact, I tried something different for 1 year and I hated it. I actually went to school for visual communications for a year, which is basically making websites, doing graphic design and stuff like that, and I just couldn't stand it. To me, there's nothing like being live and being on the scene, or being always live, and we can't go down. We got to keep it up no matter what it takes. That to me is really cool, and that's why I love television. So growing up in television, going to school for television, then I got a job at one station, worked there for 10 months. They were not going to make me full-time. So because I couldn't get a full-time gig, I actually changed stations, worked with Rebecca, who's in the comments, where she worked. And so I got a part-time job there, then moved to full-time. Started out as a full-time camera operator and audio operator. So I used to run the audio board for the newscast. And then basically worked my way up. I learned master control. I learned how to do live shots, there's actually two parts of live shots. There's microwave live shots, which is the big mast on the top of the truck that beams it back to the station. Then I also learned how to do the satellite truck, which means I could go anywhere in the country and do a live shot via satellite. I still do that to this day, occasionally. We actually don't use satellite very much, but we do occasionally. So I learned how to do all that stuff. Then I worked my way up to master control and, like I said, satellite. And then I was always good at computers. I've always played with computers and been able to figure stuff out. So I was kind of like helping the IT guy and helping the maintenance people, as a production engineer, or as a master control operator. Basically, I could fix the problem myself most of the time. And so when a opportunity came forward to basically do a hybrid role, I chose that, and then became the IT manager eventually when people, moved on. So the chat is extremely busy, it looks like. So let me go back to the chat. I'm glad that you guys are all here. I appreciate every single one of you. I love the fact that you're here. So Rebecca asked, what did TV engineers do 18 years ago? Well, a lot was different 18 years ago. When I started at the station, we were analog. I believe we had a digital transmitter. You could probably correct me if I'm wrong. I think we did. But basically, it was a side thought. It was just there. We had to run it, but we weren't really doing much with it. And so we were analog station. We still played all the tapes or video or shows off tape. Actually, I might have a picture of that. Hold that thought. I'm curious. Do I have a picture of this? I may be able to show you. We can do show and tell a little bit. Do I have some historic pictures? I really hope I do. Be fun. Do not see them. No, unfortunately, I don't. They're not on this computer. Laptop. Nope. Anyway, so basically, we were all analog and digital was just getting started. Things were played off tape. We still played the Oprah Winfrey Show off 1-inch, which was the kind of old reel-to-reel, machines. We're off of playing things off beta. We were 4x3. I mean, this broadcast alone is probably more advanced than some of the things we did back then. It's kind of crazy how fast things have accelerated in the world. I mean, now we're HD. We have, as of last week, we now have 7 sub-channels plus the main channel. So instead of dealing with one channel of programming, your analog channel, we now have an HD channel and 7 SD channels to worry about. The pace of things change that's one thing that's just constantly been accelerating. It seems like we constantly change things. Before, things were fed off satellites, then it went to a satellite-based delivery system. Now we're downloading things off the internet and putting them into the server and playing them back. It's been crazy, the amount of change I've seen in 18 years. DJ Ware is here. Hi, DJ Ware. Yes, Sinclair was the station that got hacked. I believe also Cox Media, I think, was hacked as well. I could be wrong about that one, but I know Sinclair was definitely the one that made the headlines. Tony's in the house. Hi, Tony. Rebecca asked, what should students go into the field study if they want to get into broadcast engineering? I would say computers. Networking is huge. You want to know networking. Everything's on the network. Everything touches the network. If you're not on the network, you're basically not in existence at the station. Computers, security nowadays. If you want to become an IT person, you got to know security at least somewhat. It's a big part of our role these days. But I would say basically know stuff. Know what a microphone is and how to plug it in. Know how a camera works at a base level. You don't have to know the particulars of every single camera because cameras change. But you got to know the basics. You got to know how video works in terms of flow and audio flow, and a program like OBS where you're combining things and making works and streaming, is a great way to get started. Unfortunately, that's kind of like the base level. That's, as they would say, 101 stuff is streaming. The stuff we get into is multi-layered, multiple people involved. It's much more complicated than your streaming setup, but it's a great place to get started. And then I would just challenge yourself from there, add multiple elements like a chat, like a replay, like a logo, and move on forth, and then work with other people. That's the biggest thing in television is you don't do it by yourself. Nobody works alone. People do work alone, but you're part of a team. Even people who work by themselves send their video back so that a team can play it back for a newscast or can publish it to the website. So you're never alone. So get used to working with people. You have to work with people every day, and sometimes long days, depending on what job you're doing. So I would say know the basics, know everything you can, and just get involved and do it. I find that people just don't often want to do it themselves. They want to have somebody else do it, or they want to know about it. But I say go out and do it. You have to go out and get it done. That's what I did. That's what we did. Rebecca and I, when we were in college, wanted to cover Dance Marathon, which is a 32-hour event, I believe. And we wanted to cover the whole thing. And so we went and found a way to do it. And it was a struggle. It was painful. I hurt my leg by falling off a ladder at one of them. But it was cool, and I remember those days like they were yesterday. And I went out and did it. We went out and did it. Even though most people were like, you don't need to do that. It's like, we don't need to do it. We wanted to do it. So we went out and did it. And that's what I find to be the most helpful thing, is just go out and do it. Joe wants to know, can you talk about the signal flow? Yes. So at the TV station, the news anchors are sitting in a studio, a actually quite large studio, with monitors behind them and whatnot, and they're in front of a camera. They're wearing a microphone. So the camera, we have 5 cameras, go through a video switcher. In this case, ours is a Sony, and it's a big switcher. It's actually, no, never mind. So it's a Sony. So the cameras go into the Sony switcher. the graphics and all the elements you see on camera are also going to that same switcher. That switcher, I believe, has 128 inputs, 96 inputs, I believe. So it's much bigger than a Blackmagic switcher or an ATEM or whatever it is. We have 96 inputs, and they're mostly full. I think we have 2 inputs left on the one card and probably a second whole card. So we only have like 14 inputs that aren't being used. So all the elements come into that switcher for the newscast, and then the audio goes to an audio board where it's mixed with all the elements. Those 2 units then are split. They're different units. They come together in what we call an embedder. And that's where the audio and video are combined into one signal and then timed so the lip sync is correct. That embedder also takes care of the captioning. Captioning gets embedded at that point. And then it flows around the TV station as one signal. In our case, that signal then goes to a rack that is controlled by people in Charlotte, as we are hubbed, as they call it. But the signal never leaves Toledo. It just stays there. And so it gets routed through a couple different layers of stuff, basically switching gear for various things like commercial insertion, EAS or emergency alert systems, weather, all that stuff can be layered on top of that signal. So that signal then goes through and goes into what we call an encoder. And it's actually a series of Linux machines, Linux virtual machines, that basically take that signal, and it's a full 1.5 gigabits per second. So uncompressed HD video, 1080i. It's 100. Sorry, hold on. It's 1.5 gigs. That goes in the encoder, along with those 7 subchannels that I talked about. They come into that encoder, and this box is a VMware ESXi machine, and it combines all the signals, all 8 signals, into one, and it goes from 1.5 meg down to about 10. And then the other signals get converted from their format down as well to like maybe a meg or 2. All that gets combined into one feed, which is called an ASI feed. It's 19.39 megabits per second. It can't be any higher, it can't be any lower. So it's 19.39. It comes out of that signal, or that encoder, goes through a distribution amplifier, so it gets sent to different places like cable, YouTube TV, other places like that. It then goes to a microwave transmitter, which then takes that 19.39 megabit signal, puts it on a microwave carrier that then sends it out to our transmitter site, which is about 10 miles away from the station, because most station studios are not located next to their transmitters. I mean, some are, but it's a handful compared to how many stations are actually out there. So we then send that signal out to the transmitter site, which is away from the population usually, because the land's cheaper and it's just easier to get land when you can build a tower. It then is received there, comes down a path. In our case, it gets converted to a different format, but that's kind of old and going away. So basically that signal then goes into the transmitter. The transmitter is actually the picture, the thumbnail picture that I posted for this live stream is our actual transmitter. Actually, it's 2 transmitters in that picture. It's basically split down the middle. That transmitter is actually then what makes the signal you watch at home. So that transmitter, there's a piece in there called an exciter. That exciter is what actually makes the signal. So it takes the video, it excites it, if you will, or makes it on an RF spectrum, which is 6 megahertz wide, and it's low wattage like that point, maybe 5-10 watts. It then goes through the whole transmitter and goes up to, in our case, I think 3.6 kilowatts. Hold on. Sorry about that. So in our case, that transmitter is about 3.6 kilowatts. It then goes up a pipe that's probably this big. I mean, bigger than my head. It goes up a tower. In our case, it's 1,000 feet tall. It goes up to an antenna that is huge, and broadcasts that signal out to everybody on your home. So that's the signal flow. Hope that made sense. It probably was a little faster, more complicated than it should have been, but that's basically the gist of how it goes from the camera to your TV. Wow, I'm way behind in chat. Holy cow. Bob Carpenter's here. Thanks, Bob. Yeah, this is actually just kind of a $45 microphone off of Amazon, but it looks cool. Joe says, I live by ESPN, and there used to be literally hundreds of satellites in front of their buildings. Some are huge. What are they for? So, I bet you they're still there. There's not as many, because they still use satellite. Um, Basically, that's how they get their programming. Because, let's say the Cleveland Indians are playing the Boston Red Sox, right? Yeah, that's baseball. So they're playing, a baseball game in Boston. The production truck sends their signal, makes the game broadcast there. It then goes to the satellite truck. That satellite truck then broadcasts it via satellite back to Bristol, where ESPN is located. And then it then goes back through their facility, and then it goes back out on satellite again, distributed to people like DirecTV or your cable company or whoever. So if you're watching a football game or a baseball game, it probably had two satellite hops, one to go to ESPN to get the commercials inserted, and then the crawl added, and then back out on satellite again to viewers at home. Now that's slowly changing as the broadcast industry changes, the TV industry changes, I should say, and more facilities have fiber to the venue. The truck can actually plug right into that fiber and cut out that first satellite hop. So that's probably why they have less satellites now than they used to, because there's just more internet connectivity. And I can actually show you that. Let me look for my photos. I can show you that. Maybe. um. What can I show you without getting in trouble? that's I guess that's the question. Here we go. So let me show you this real quick. Hopefully you guys can see that. Yep. Oh, let me remove chat. So this is one of the rooms at a venue. This happens to be, I think, Cleveland. And basically, the cables that are down below on the floor are coming from the truck. They go into this room, and they get patched into the venue. They get patched into the internet. They get patched into whoever in this case, it was Fox Sports, I believe. So they get connected to there, and signals are flowing around the internet and getting converted and going all different places now. And some go to Texas, some go to New York City, they go to LA. So this is one of those rooms where things get plugged into and just go everywhere. And that's why you don't need satellites anymore, because they're just going across the internet. And the amount of bandwidth that's in that room, I mean, I can only imagine. I know one of the boxes had 100 gigs listed on it. So I know it was at least 100 gigs of internet coming into one of those boxes. So hopefully that answers your question about why there aren't any more satellites, or as many satellites. Tommy's in the house. IT is a must for pretty much all the TV gear and modern. Yep. Everything is computer. I mean, literally, like I said, our encoders are virtual machines on VMware. Sorry. The radio station I do some weekend work at, um, the automation system runs on XCP-ng and is Linux based. I mean, everything's a computer these days. Our audio encoders at the radio station are basically custom built computers. Nowadays, if you do want to get a modern encoder for a radio station, you're probably running a Docker container. I know Axia is doing all their stuff as Docker containers now, which I honestly don't know much about. I've played with, but it's not my. I don't really get into a whole lot of Docker containers. But yeah, you definitely need IT. Joe says hi, Bob. Bob says, or Tony says hi. I'm gonna skip that. Um, yes, Joe. I'm using OBS for this. I don't have any hardware. I don't really. I mean, I don't really need a lot of setup like that. I probably should have some stuff. I keep looking at it, but basically, this is just a Logitech C920, I think, camera. Um, OBS in my computer. It's not a very powerful computer. It's just an old desktop I had lying around. I do have the Stream Deck from Elgato in front of me. That is very, very, very helpful if you're going to do OBS streaming. Get yourself an Elgato. Well, actually, for any kind of streaming. If you're doing like your self stream, you need a Stream Deck because I got buttons for different sources and to mute my microphone and turn stuff on and off, and I couldn't do it otherwise. So I got a Elgato Stream Deck. Again, I have an Audio Arts USB microphone preamp and the microphone cable and this extension arm. And so with the webcam, a computer. I'm actually running two computers. I'm running one for OBS and I'm running one for the chat, so I can have both screens open. Rebecca says, "Oh, that's an inside joke." Yeah. 9 people watching and only 3 likes. Please, yes, smash the like button. But I'm glad that there are 9 people here. I really do appreciate you watching. I'm thankful for every single one of you here. So thank you very much. Cabling. How's cabling changed? Well, actually, it used to be on some really thick. Was it RG6? I think it was. The analog plant rode on a lot of thicker analog cable. The new HD stuff now runs on basically RG59 is what I think it is. It's well, we use Belden 1505. If you want to look it up, Belden 1505. Yeah, so this is the stuff we use now. 1505A. Go away. So yeah, so we use this cable now. We buy it 1,000 foot at a time, and we are definitely going through cable. This cable's nice. It's actually lighter than the old stuff. It's pretty easy to work with. We have the professional cable stripper. Basically, we plug it into, and therefore it does a lot of the work for us. You then slide the end on. It takes you maybe a minute and a half to make a cable. Pretty nice stuff. You get it in different colors too, which is really helpful because in a TV facility, there's different kinds of signals. So you got your HD video, you have your audio, maybe as in the form of AES or analog. Sometimes you might have SD video, different color. You have sync or reference because everything has to be linked together. You have a source called reference or black, and basically all that's tied together. So that cable usually is black. Your video cables are usually a color like blue. Audio might be yellow or red, some other color. You don't use it a lot, so it's not like it's going to be a big deal. Like in our case, all of our video cables are blue. So hopefully that answers your question. Oh, we don't really use a whole lot of analog audio cable anymore. Basically, our audio now at the station is all didnt. It's all audio over IP. So there's networking cables. I mean, basically everything's a network cable, or at least in the terms of audio, it's all networking. Same with the radio station I work at. It's all live wire, so it's all audio over IP, just a different flavor. Basically, Pepsi Coke, same kind of thing. Um, and so it's all networking as well, which makes it really, really easy when you got to move a studio around. If you haven't seen my video about moving studios around, look at my previous thing. I did some videos about moving around. We moved a studio from one building on campus across campus in like 4 hours. It was incredible. There was no way it was going to happen in previously to audio over IP. That would have took days of cabling. In this case, it took a couple hours of moving some gear around and plugging it back in and making it work. It's so audio over IP is incredible technology. Whether that's Livewire, which is an Axia product, Dante, which is Audinet, I believe makes Dante. I forget, but either way, it's Dante. Everyone uses Dante now. Basically, it's kind of the standard. There are other flavors out there like Livewire and WheatNet, but they're not as popular. So there are. Bob is putting links to the other YouTubers if you want to follow them. If you were to climb the tower, yes. Well, I mean, not right away. You would definitely. There is a thing called RF burns. I have never been burned by RF, but people have told me it doesn't feel good. RF does not kill you instantly or fast. It is painful and slow. But yes, I mean, you would, if you were on the tower as it was transmitting, you would definitely feel the side effects. When we have tower climbers go up there to do work, they require us to lower our power down to about 20%, maybe 30%, depends on the transmit, depends on what normal is. But basically, yeah, we lower the power so that they don't cook. Now, you can get pretty much underneath the antenna and you'll be fine because the power is going out. It doesn't go down or up so much, it goes out. So you can get pretty close to it, but if you're actually crossing, if you're going up over the antenna or you're going to be on the antenna for whatever work you're doing, the power level has to be lowered so that antenna does not fry you. The RF coming out of that antenna does not fry you because it can hurt you. It definitely can. So that is definitely a concern. Tony asked, what percentage of remote broadcasts are done via SRT or satellite? We don't, at the station, don't use any SRT. We only use what we call, there's companies called Dejero, LiveView, and TVU. The cellular bonded backpacks are what we use mostly for live shots these days. That has changed the way we do television. They are small, mobile. They are able to move around, easy to set up. Anybody can run them. Those are the pros. The cons, they don't work everywhere. I mean, you go out to a farm field where no one lives, cell phone reception spotty, or you go to a football game where there are 100,000 people, chances are your internet connection is not going to be very good. So we use cellular bonded backpacks for most of our live shots. We do have microwave. People do use it. Satellite is the smallest amount of time we use. I probably book 3 satellite uplinks a year at this rate we're going. I know we're using one in November for a big football game. We're going to use one for a race we're doing, just because we're out of microwave paths, so we're going to use satellite instead, even though it's only going about a mile down the street. One thing I can say about satellite is everyone thinks it's expensive. It's not that expensive if you go through a third-party booker. If you don't go through your network feeds, like your CBS or ABC or whatever, if you go through like a middle party, like a third party that goes directly to the satellite company, we get it for like $2 a minute. I mean, and that may sound expensive, but if you're rolling a commercial break that's thousands of dollars, what's $100 for satellite time? I mean, it's kind of small. So $2 a minute is what we spend on satellite these days. And I I can actually do two satellite shots, two different video shots in one satellite feed for that $2 a minute. So I can send back two different reporters in that same slot, and so it's $1 per reporter per minute. I mean, that's pretty cheap, I think. Oh, that's a loaded question, Joe. Um, Most talent is pretty good. Honestly, I never really had an issue with talent um, for the most part. I can think of one example where things did not go well. But honestly, I think I had more issues with the crews, whether it be a producer or a photographer who wants something that's impossible. Um, Fun little story if you want a story. Um, our main anchor was interviewing a presidential candidate, and at the last second, I mean, literally like at 5 minutes till the newscast, we decided to change it up. And the photog wanted to bring out a mixer, and mix the audio because he was going to have a guest. So our main anchor was going to have a guest out with them, and we're just going to say it didn't go well. And so the entire first segment had bad audio, um, and that was not good. And because it was the whole first segment, we couldn't stop and go to a break and fix it. We just finished the segment with bad audio the whole time, and then as soon as we hit that commercial break, we ripped that mixer out and got rid of it and went back to our standard way of doing it, which is one microphone per camera, and simple audio and video combined, and go out, and got rid of that issue. And so I don't find talent to be usually the issue. I don't work with talent a lot, but I mean, they're not usually the issue. It's usually somebody else behind the scenes who wants something that isn't possible or wasn't communicated, and therefore now it's a scramble to make it work because something was not communicated. Communication is key, and sometimes when it's not there, things go badly. So that's the biggest issue I run into. 12G SDI, know how to crimp. Well, BNC cable is a BNC cable. What makes the difference, as far as I'm concerned, is the type of cable. The smaller stuff can carry. I mean, they all can carry the same amount of bandwidth, basically, but the smaller stuff, the skinnier stuff, is harder to work with because it's smaller. The 1505 that I use is pretty decent size for my fingers, and therefore I can manipulate it easily. But I mean, that BNC cable is a BNC cable. It terminates the same way. So I think that hopefully that answers your question. Yep, teams and communications. That's the name of the game. Joe says 96 inputs. Yeah, and almost enough. That sounds like a lot until you start thinking if we have, for example, 5 studio cameras. We have 4 sky cams. We have 3 weather machines. We have 4 channels of graphics playout. So that's 8 channels when you do key and fill. So, I mean, 5, 4, 3 plus 8. We have network feeds. We have 8 HD routes, we call them. Basically, they're router panels. So they're you can route anything on the router into the switcher via these 8 paths. So there you have 8 of those. You have the switcher has internal memory as well. We have so yeah, we get up there. I don't know the exact count, but we definitely run out of it. We're running out of inputs. I think we're good for now, but we're definitely gonna. We could, in theory, run out of inputs. Tommy asked, "Do you have a router matrix?" Yes, we have an Evertz EQX router. It is 128 inputs by 96 outputs, and it is almost full. It used to be full, but then when we got hubbed, we took a lot of things off that router. But then we added some stuff. For example, the Fox News has 6 video paths they send you. CBS now you can choose from 2. So I mean, you're bringing these feeds in all the time from the networks. And they all add up, and so they're all in the router. And you got hub sources now, and you have multiple network feeds. You may have a primary network feed, a backup network feed, an auxiliary feed from your network. So there's 3 inputs. So we have a house router, and then the switcher, and then like I said, we have 8 paths that we have 8 paths that connect the 2 together. But yeah, we have a house router, and it costs a pretty penny. It is just a router. It doesn't do anything fancy. There are routers that you can get where you could do de-embedding in them, which is basically breaking the audio out of the video and manipulating the audio separately from the video. Some routers allow you to do that, and then you can recombine them. So you could take the audio from one source and an audio from a different source and combine them with a different video source. Like you could make, it gets really weird because until I did sports, you don't realize that, but basically you may have one video feed and you may have different audio for different kind of music. So you may have the live music feed, you may have a archival music feed, you may have an international music feed, you may have a feed that has no announcers and just sound effects, and that all gets manipulated in those routers and combined and moved around in ways that can sometimes blow your mind when you're not used to doing that kind of stuff. Joe asked, "Oh wow, interesting that you put the audio post." Yeah, I mean, the switcher is video switcher only. It only does audio. It cannot do audio. It only does video. And the audio board is an audio board. So basically, there's 2 different devices ran by 2 different people. So the director is running the switcher. The audio board is running the audio board. Audio operator is running the audio board. They sit in different rooms. So you have your video and your audio separately. And then one is didnt based, one is SDI based. So signals flow at different rates. And then therefore, we have to then time them up right before they go into the router so that it's accurate at that point. And then from there on, because it's in one signal, it's always accurate. You want to see my drinking cup? So this is a lemonade cup that I got at the fair the other day. I just like it because it holds a lot of water, and I figured I would need it, and it's true. So there's my drinking cup. Joe asked, why 19.39 megabits per second? That is how much data you can fit into a 6 megahertz wide channel in the US and Canada and Mexico. We all use the same system. It's called ATSC. That's the standard we all use, and it's defined. And that's the 19.39 is what it's defined as. It's must be MPEG-2 video. The audio is AC3, and so it's got to meet those specs. That's just what it is. 6 megahertz was chosen or was used because that's what the analog standard was. It was 6 megahertz wide, and therefore to keep everything consistent, we just use 6 megahertz. ATSC3 is IP based, different modulation, and the data rate is actually adjustable based on how much air encoding you want to use. So I think it's 22-ish, somewhere in that neighborhood. But it's still 6 megahertz wide because it has to exist with the current system. So that window of spectrum is what actually defines how much space we can use. So it's 6 megahertz. The current system is 19.39. The new one is adjustable, but it's around 21 or 22 if I remember correctly. Yeah, Tony, we have some drawings that if I would have thought to take pictures of, you would probably would confuse you. I could actually send you probably some of those if you wanted to. It confuses me. So just because there's so many things going on, and I could probably, can I show you? I can show you. Well, you saw that room. I mean, this is just oops. No. Oh, you saw that room. Can't think if I have any good pictures of cabling at the station. I probably do. I just can't think of where they're at. So, let's keep going. I appreciate the questions. I love that you're all here. It says I have 11 viewers, which is an all-time high for me, so I appreciate that. No, it's 19.39 is just how much the 8 VSB modulation scheme can handle. The sidebands are what limit, how close you can come to that, adjustment or the interference. What happened to my OBS? Oh, there it is. Okay. FCC 6 megahertz. Maybe I can find a picture. Here we go. Can you guys see that? Yes. So here's what the channel is. Basically, you have the up top. You see the channel 6. You have it's 6 megahertz wide, and then you have the actual data stream below that. That's that yellow line where it comes up, and then it's all looks like noise, or basically just a bunch of up and downs. That's the actual signal, the data that's modulated onto the signal. Apparently this is talking about the next generation signal because it says next gen, which is the ATSC3. Oh wait, no, sorry. Yeah, you're basically got your span there and your data. So that's what it looks like. And so there's not a lot of buffer, if you will, or a lot of space between channels. They're pretty tight next to each other. Oh, that's a hybrid signal. I probably should look at that first. I can actually show you. No, I can't. So yeah, so that's basically what it looks like. You can see how the signal pops up and then it goes almost all the way to the edge before coming down. Those filters are pretty tight there in terms of. That's a good picture. What exactly is ATSC? So you'll see here what it looks like. Basically, it's you got a pilot and you have all your data flowing across from the left to the right versus what it was in the analog world, where you had your video carrier, which is your luminance, then you have your chrominance carrier, which is your color information, and then your FM carrier was the audio. So that's how it went from analog to digital. That's kind of what it looks like on a spectrum graph. So hopefully that answers your question. Do engineers climb the tower? No, actually, my company forbids any engineers to climb the tower. We have to hire a professional tower climber company to do any tower work. I'm sure it's insurance based. I don't know the actual reason, but I'm guessing it's based off insurance. So we hire professional tower climbers that go around the country, and that's all they do is go from company or from location to location and climb towers. And so they do all the work up on the tower itself. And anymore, a lot of the engineers don't even do RF work. So basically, if we wanted to do a transmitter install, or when we did a transmitter install, we actually hired a company to come out and do it for us. So we just kind of babysat them while they did all the work because that's what they do. It's very specialized, specialized knowledge. So most TV engineers today won't actually ever install a transmitter or hang an antenna because it's just people do that for a living and that's what they do and they specialize in it. So I heard from local engineer, yeah, I would not be surprised. Yeah, I mean, 2,000 feet tower is it's gonna move on you. That's for sure. Even skyscrapers move on you, and they're bigger and whatnot. But uh, 15 feet does sound like a lot, but it could be. I mean, I just don't know. Fun fact: the tallest tower in America is 2,063 feet tall. It is in North Dakota, and I believe it sets the uh, FAA minimum flight height for planes because it is the tallest object in America um, at 2,063 feet. No, I'm not Unky Joe, so the chat didn't jump. I've always wondered if this had been a true emergency. How does the emergency take over? Um, so we have boxes called EAS boxes. They're actually in the news right now because a hacker at DEF CON is showing how to break into one if you haven't updated the software in like a year. But if you've updated your software within the last year, you're fine. Basically, the EAS box listens to actually each other. So, like, my station listens to certain radio stations in the area. Those radio stations carry or are the entry point for the EAS message. So basically, if the president wanted to talk, the FEMA would push a button, it would send down a national alert from FEMA. That would then enter the broadcast system in the capitals of every single state. There's we call it LP1 and an LP2 entry point. I don't know what LP stands for, but it's LP1 and LP2. And so basically, the LP1 station would start to broadcast the national message. The tones would tell our box, hey, national alert, go. And it would just go on the air and broadcast it. For a national alert, we cannot stop it. But for every other type of message, we can, within reason, control it. So like your required weekly test, we actually generate those. There are monthly tests where we pass them on. So the LP1 for my area would generate a monthly test. We would then pass that on within a certain time frame. But yes, for the national, alert, it comes from Washington D.C. and it would just take over our station audibly. It would not take over the video, but you would see a crawl and then you would hear the audio directly from FEMA via several stations. It's a relay system. So basically, it comes from one station, the other station picks it up and rebroadcast it, then we would pick it up and rebroadcast it, which is why during the National Periodic Test a while back, you heard a bunch of noise in some stations, and sometimes they didn't get repeated, and it was a big failure for a lot of stations because they weren't set up right or they weren't, receiving the message in the first place. And so that's why we test things like your message. Tony asks, do the local stations pay a distribution fee to the cable, blah, blah, blah? No, we actually get paid by the cable system or streaming company. So you pay cable, and because cable's carrying our signal, they pay us a percentage of your fee. So when the cable company says, everyone asks, why is cable so expensive? Well, if you pay, let's say, $100 a month for your cable, and you're getting 300 channels of cable, including the movies and whatever, well, we get a fraction of that. Funny thing is, cable TV started out back in the day as a way to carry broadcast signals to houses in apartment complexes and places where you couldn't get reception. So that's how cable basically got started. And then they added the premium services on top of that. And to this day, broadcast channels are still the most popular cable channels out there on a consistent basis. I mean, ESPN might win the night for Monday Night Football, but the broadcast channels in total viewership still have more viewers. So we get a percentage of your cable fee because you're paying them to deliver our signal to you. So we get paid by the cable systems. It's called retransmission, and you've probably heard of it when there's a fight, because we say, you know, we, the metaphorically, we, not like my station or my company, but we say, hey, we want to charge you X number of dollar or cents per viewer. Usually it's in the, a dollar maybe tops, but we want to charge you $1 for each subscriber. And the cable company says, no, we don't want to do that because we don't think you're worth that. And then, so there's a negotiation, and if it falls through, then the channel gets yanked because we don't give approval for you to view that. And then there's a whole negotiation that happens, and that's way above my pay grade. So that's retransmission. You will see that happen. Basically, there's usually one big fight every year between the cable companies and a broadcaster. It's in the news. You can read about it. And so that's probably all I should say about that. Bob says, I'll bet those tones at the beginning are DTMF, which, yeah, basically there's certain tones, and it's actually illegal for you to broadcast those tones anywhere else. So you can't use them on a radio broadcast. You can't use them as part of a commercial. You can't use them as part of your show. Those tones are reserved for that message, and so therefore you cannot reuse them unless you are doing an actual alert. People get in trouble. It is a rule. You cannot reuse those messages. So I would encourage none of you to ever use those audio clips from those, we call them duck farts. I don't know why they're called that, but they're called duck farts. And basically that noise that you hear when you first comes on the air, never use that as part of your broadcast or your show. Not a good idea. It's bad news. You're welcome. Well, they used to be hardware encoders. They used to be physical specialized boxes, and because computers are so powerful these days, the company we use has figured out how to make them basically virtual machines. There's one virtual machine for the encoding, and I believe there's one virtual machine for the combining, basically how you make that one signal, and then they run on a virtual machine. And our provider actually custom wrote drivers for ESXi to make sure that the input card that's in the back of the computer that has all the little they're like micro BNC jacks. They're really small, but they're still like BNC jacks. They wrote custom software for that, and it converts they do it in all IP space, converts the IP into ASI or those little BNC jacks, and they actually wrote the driver for ESXi to make it so they can run virtual machines. Yes, Belden is Broadcast Excellence, and they also own like everything now. I think they just bought someone else. Yeah, so some of you might know that I do freelance work, and I do freelance sports production mostly, and I've been an A2. I've also been an E2. So in television, like I said, it's a team effort, so you have lots of different people, and one of those people is an A1, and he's the person who actually mixes the audio. He's in charge of the audio for that broadcast. He is the one who sits in front of a big mixer, and because I feel like getting off camera for a second, let me show you what a mixer looks like. I'll show you if I can find one. Hold on, I'm searching my other window just so you don't see all my files. My plans to take over the world. Here we go. So that's the audio mixer. I hope you guys can see that. I think you can, yep. So that's what the audio mixer of a production truck looks like. That's what the A1 runs. Um, and so basically, I can't really zoom in right now. So that's all the different sources that the audio person has. So that's what the A1 does. The A2, why my chat move? Interesting. So that's what the A1 does. He actually is in charge of the actual audio mix. A2, which is what I've done before, is the audio assistant, as I call it. Basically, the A2 or several A2s will go out and set up the microphones and the IFB boxes for the talent. They might go set up the intercom for the camera operators or the field crew. So the A1 pretty much never leaves the truck. They just are sitting at the mixer and they run the audio for the show. The A2s are the guys running back and forth between the trucks and the field and setting up all the microphones. You have a V1, which is a video operator. They run the video part of it. Maybe I can find a photo of it. Yeah, so this is video. You see the different little control panels there. V1 is the head video shader. V2 would be basically the assistant for him. They are responsible for making sure the color of the cameras are good and the white balance and all that stuff. They also will set up a lot of the other video gear, like feeds that leave the truck and come into the truck. And then you got your director who's calling the shots. You have your TD who's a technical director. They're the ones who run the big switcher. I don't know if I have a picture of one in here. Oh, so here's what a video switcher looks like. This is what the TD would run, and actually control the broadcast. You have a producer and graphics people who make graphics, and sometimes there are whole sections or whole rooms just for graphics people. I mean, that's how many people it takes to do graphics in some of these shows. I can show you this. This is one of the production trucks that I've been on. The left side is and then down in the corner is that the K-frame. That's the actual video switcher. On the right-hand side where it says Envision, that whole big thing is the router. On these production trucks, it gets crazy, like 1,000+ sources, potentially. So there's your, switcher on the left, router on the right. Hope that answers your question. I probably forgot somebody. Oh, replay is in these trucks. They use a product called EVS. So there's replay operators. I mean, yeah, I should do a whole thing on just remote production because that would be a whole live stream in itself because that is crazy. And I should get pictures ready next time. It doesn't kill you fast. It's painful and slow. It's true. I don't know what the umbrella... Oh, the umbrella... Yeah, so the signal actually goes out and then, kind of as the curvature of the earth and whatnot and spreads out from there. So the power kind of goes out overhead of you. We actually have viewers who are near the transmitter site who call and complain because they're too close to the tower to get good reception. And, fun fact, too much signal is actually a bad thing. So if you are really close and you're getting too much signal, you overload the front end of your receiver and therefore you actually don't get any reception. So too much signal is actually a bad thing. Yes, we actually have, the station has a generator, the transmitter site has a generator, because you could lose power at one and not the other, or you lose power at both. So we have massive generators. I forget the wattage, but basically it'll take most of the building power. We have UPSs everywhere. If we don't have we have UPSs for everything. me look up photo. Um, this isn't like one that I'm, that's at our studio, but basically, um, that black box in the middle of the picture is actually two different generators, um, and that's what feeds the TV compound. But basically, we have generators at our station that for that exact same purpose, to basically power in case the power goes out. Um, we actually do lose power at our studio quite a bit. It's more than I would like, but luckily with the generators and UPS, it's never really an issue. If there were ever to, no, you can't access a satellite technically without booking time. But if you call a booking company, you basically can get on within minutes. If you call the networks, at that point, if you're in a disaster mode, the networks might just say, here, go ahead, here's your space, because they already have it pre-booked in a lot of cases. So I guess it depends on what network you're working for and how big the disaster is. It is a problem, though, if you have no cell phone company, there's no cell phone coverage. You can't call the satellite bridge to get access, so that is a problem. A recent satellite person who I know went to the floods in West Virginia, and there was no cell phone coverage because it's West Virginia, and there was a flood that knocked out everything. So luckily, he had a satellite phone that he could use to call the bridge to get access to the satellite, and then once he was up on the satellite, they did an IP-based transmission, and so he then had internet, VoIP phones, and video delivery all over that satellite path, and so he could make phone calls and use the internet and send the live shot back via IP over satellite, which is cool because we're doing the way they do it. It's their own slot of the satellite, and therefore it's not like Skynet, or not Skynet, Viasat or Viasat. It's not shared. It's not small, low bandwidth. Basically, it uses the whole transponder, or as much of the transponder as you want to use. It's dedicated bandwidth, and those guys get some serious internet speeds through the satellite, and it's dedicated for those trucks. So you need a phone of some sort to establish that first communication link, but then the big guys can do some cool stuff with it. But I would need a cell phone to access the satellite, and then have that IFB call, because the satellite's one way in my case. So we send the reporter back or whatever we're broadcasting back to the studio, but we don't hear anything back. So we have to have a phone line or a cell phone to establish that return path. Kind of like we did for the Zoom room. You basically have a phone call for your IFB or your communication channel, and then your satellite is more like your, SRT feed, or your main presentation feed is. So you need a cell phone or some kind of connectivity to have that back path, unless you're the big guys and doing it that way. Whoa, hold on, what happened here? Hey, look, Bob, the chat jumped. Damn it. Our satellite receivers blocked us from half the ability. Yeah, if you're in a buildings block satellites, it happens. You need to find a good roof spot where you can see all the satellites. We have a problem where one of our satellites is blocked by the roof edge of we have a split roof, and so the satellite's down here, and this roof edge is actually blocking part of the satellite, and so in certain aspects we actually lose signal and doesn't get as strong a signal because part of it's being blocked by the roof. So we have some issues as well, and there's a skyscraper next door that we have to plays tricks on us sometimes too. Can the White House broadcast? Yes. Not directly to the stations. Like I said, it has to go through the relay system. But if they push the button, they're on the air. There's no stopping them. Do you know something we don't know? Yeah, I'm curious, Joe. You definitely have a lot of questions, which I appreciate. I really do. But yes, and yeah, you, Bob. Nothing happens in Canada, from what I'm told, so you're fine there. How big a change is a TV signal encryption for broadcast? Well, I don't think there are people out there who are doing encryption, but really, I don't think most stations will encrypt their new signals. I really don't. I think they're gonna give them away for free because we want people to watch us. We don't want them. We don't want to be in the middle, the subscription based business. Um, I mean, some people will probably be, but I don't think we will. So the new standard, while it supports encryption, um, we probably won't be using it. And I can't imagine most people will. I really don't. Just because we want eyeballs on our video and our ads. That's how we make money. Offering subscription services is cool, and some people will do it, but I don't see it being a big thing. There's a company out there in, I think, Utah who is doing a cable subscription over the air trial, essentially, where you could pay to get access to like your Fox News or whatever, and it's sent via an over the air station. But I've never actually seen that happen yet, so it could happen. Can you talk about internet connections? Um, our station has two redundant fiber connections, both 1 gig, and so we have redundant fiber because a lot of stuff goes over our internet connections these days. A lot of our sub channels actually come in via the internet now, and we send a lot of feeds out for like streaming over the internet. So we have redundant IP connections, and we're actually upgrading those here soon. So redundant fiber for sure, and then, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, in theory, we have a microwave path to the transmitter site. The transmitter site also has satellites that we could then use if we lost the microwave path. We could put up on satellite and deliver it that way instead if we had to. So redundancy is definitely the name of the game in broadcasting and in professional television. So we have, multiple ways of doing almost everything. Some are a lot easier than others, but they definitely have them. It varies, and that's probably all I should talk about, but it varies. Um, Fences, cameras, key code access, all of that exists everywhere. Everyone uses it. Yeah, I mean, there's multiple layers of security at a TV station, and I should probably leave it at that. From Wikipedia, yes, I mean, like I said, it's adjustable because in the new standard, basically, you set how redundant you want your broadcast to be. So you can set it where it's so low that a cell phone can pick it up with basically no antenna, but then you can't get a lot of data through it. You also can set it up where it requires a dedicated outdoor antenna, and then you can push a lot of data through it, but you limit your reach, and so it's a compromise. How much data do you want to put through the pipe, but how redundant do you want it to be? Right now, it's a fixed standard. We can't change it. But in the new way, we can basically change it where we can have a very robust, lower layer, and meaning that, you could watch it on your cell phone, and then if you can get the higher order modulation, you can then get the higher quality streams. Now, one thing everyone always want to ask is, well, can you deliver 4K? Well, I believe you could, but the problem is going to be it's going to require your whole signal. So right now we have 8 stations on the air. If we went 4K, we might be able to do like 2, and now we're killing our business model. So I don't think we're going to be going to 4K, and I don't see most stations going to 4K because you're going to kill your bandwidth, and therefore kill your income to deliver your one 4K stream. Now, can you shut them off and go 4K for a special game? Probably, if you wanted to do that, but I don't see most stations doing that. And for example, our router can't handle 4K. Our switcher, I don't think, can do 4K. Our encoders can't do 4K. So are we going to go rebuild our entire system to do 4K transmission? We might, but I don't see it happening personally. I personally don't believe most stations will go 4K because the bandwidth won't be there, because we want to have robust transmission and quality, in the same thing. So we're going to probably shoot for that 22, 23 bits per second where we got a good enough signal that you can get it indoors, but maybe not on your cell phone, and yet still deliver several HD streams. So what I do see happening is more HD or maybe 1080p, because that most things can handle, but I don't see 4K happening because of the bit rates. Fascinating. I'm sure I don't know what this is about. Oh, local primary one. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I probably should have thought of that. Yep, that's Digital Alert Systems is one of the 2 companies out there that makes boxes for the EAS system. It depends, Joe, on how do royalties work is what he's asking. It depends. You can have basically a blanket license and pay a lot of money, or you can basically pay a portion of the show's income to get a certain broadcast. Most stations don't have a blanket license just because it costs a lot of money. And like I was saying earlier, for the audio, like ESPN or Fox Sports or whoever, when they broadcast the game live, they might use a Taylor Swift show or song. But if they played that same game back the next day, it wouldn't have Taylor Swift because it's cheaper to get a one-time use license than it is to have a perpetual license or whatever. So you'll hear the name brand songs or the mainstream songs during the live performance, but you won't hear them on the replay, and they're not going to be available for like on demand because those are different licenses. So you might get the Taylor Swift once live, but you won't ever get it again because there's no way they're going to pay for that. It's diminishing returns, and you couldn't afford it because music licensing costs a lot of money. That's why they're called duck farts. Now that you've heard that, you can never unforget that. You gotta do a video on that Linux tree. Boy, I wish I knew what it was. I think it's just Debian with their custom software, but I could be wrong. I'll have to look into that. But I'm pretty sure it's just Debian with some custom stuff that they wrote. Tony says he's got to run. Thank you for the outstanding stream. I'll catch the rest. Yep. Take care, Tony. You're probably gone by now, but Hey, Keith. Welcome to my live stream. Everyone says hi to Keith. Yes, Keith. Oops. What happened to my chat? Oh, hold on. Chat broke. What? Uh-oh. I broke chat. No. Hold on. What happened to my chat? Oh, okay. Hold on, guys. Let me fix this. All right. Joe, you were an A2 one to get the, yes. So yeah, miking people up. That's usually it could be the A2, but usually that's like the on-set floor manager. That's what I'm trying to think of. Floor manager usually handles that responsibility of making the actual talent, but I could imagine in certain situations an A2 would do that as well. Yes, Keith, it is cool. I'm having a good time. Glad you're here. Yeah, I mean, I don't have the actual channel count, but I know the biggest router I've ever heard of was 1052 by 1052. So I know they can go up to 1,000 sources. I've never seen one that big personally, but it can happen. I think usually they're like 256 by 256 or like 512 by 512. Usually in that range is what they usually are. Um, you know what I should do is I should schedule an actual production one and get my photos and some sanitized um, PDF files and show you some of the stuff where, sorry about that, um, kind of a better presentation about that because yeah, it's really cool stuff and it blew my mind and it still blows my mind in certain situations. Basically, you know, how much stuff they deal with. Yes, for those who are here, Keith is going live tomorrow. He goes live every Tuesday. So if you want to join Keith, he talks about ATEM switchers and remote product or like in-house productions like I'm doing now. Keith, you missed it. This is just OBS. I don't have an ATEM, so this is just OBS, a webcam, this cheap microphone off Amazon, and an audio, a USB audio preamp, and I'm using Aaron Parecki's chat system, like I think you do too. So, could be, you could have beer. I mean, you never know. um, I do not believe our refrigerators are on the generator, so they might need to go on the generator now that I think about it. But yeah, could. Skynet. Yeah, I forget the name. There's Viasat or Viasat. There's DirecTV's version. There's another one out there, Extreme or Extend. I forget what it's called. There's several satellite providers, but they're all like shared. I mean, there's obviously not Skynet. That's not. The new one from Elon Musk. Can't think of it. But yeah, there's that satellite. But the problem with those satellite people is it's not high bandwidth, and the latency's high. Whereas when the guys who I know do it, it's low latency and it's 20 or 30 megs per second both ways, and it's right to a data center or right to a good internet connection. So yeah, those guys roll their own satellites or roll their own trucks because they want to control the bandwidth and whatnot. And I've actually seen this guy I follow on Facebook. He's actually done the satellite IP uplink, and then he's plugged live view backpacks into his switch and then fed them via satellite. So it's a live view bonded cellular backpack going across an IP transmission over satellite because they wanted the IP transmission to be reliable, and satellite was the best way to deliver that. So Starlink, thank you. I saw it down below. Starlink is what I was trying to think of, the new one that's all the rage. But I mean, it's not enough bandwidth to do a video feed on it, like a high quality video feed. You actually saw a satellite phone at Costco. I would love to see that. I have never seen a satellite phone. I want to see a picture. That sounds cool. Yeah, no, it's cool stuff. I mean, I should see if I can get some of his pictures and share them. I'll have to ask permission, but I should get some pictures. He is doing some really cool stuff with satellites. I love every one of his posts. I mean, he's doing some cool stuff. Well, Keith, as I was saying earlier, tomorrow is my 18th year in television at the station I'm currently at. It's my 19th year of being in television, and my dad was a TV engineer for 42 years so I grew up around television. My birth announcement, my dad actually made an announcement on his station when I was born as they were doing a live broadcast, and he actually went to the station and basically announced my birth on TV like 3 days after I was born. So I've been around television my entire life. I grew up, knowing about it. As I used to say, I grew up knowing to never call my dad at work at the top or the bottom of the hour because he was on a commercial break, or a break, I guess. Not he was it's public broadcasting system, so they don't actually air commercials, but he was airing breaks, and so I could never call my dad at work if it was the top or the bottom of the hour because he was busy. So I grew up like that. Can you talk about during COVID anchors? Yeah, they did them several ways. We actually never sent our anchors home during COVID. We basically went to single anchors and then had them by themselves in the studio. A lot of stations would sent cellular backpacks to a anchor's house and then set up a camera in their basement or wherever and let them anchor from their basement. That usually happened in the bigger markets where they have more backpacks. We only have 3 backpacks, so we could not give up our backpacks for our anchors. But what we did do for our weather people was we set up, or we had the anchor or the weather meteorologist set up a very similar setup to this, where it was a webcam, a nicer microphone, and they basically came in on Skype. We set up a custom computer just for Skype. We actually had 2 of them set up, and so we did a Skype phone call for our weather meteorologist, and we had return video in the Skype call. So when they were doing their broadcast, when they were talking like this, they were seeing what was on the air coming back at them in the Skype call. That was very helpful, so they could see their weather maps and stuff. And then because we had remote desktop sessions set up with our VPN, they were controlling the machines in the studio. It's like they were sitting there in the studio. So for them, really, it was a big change because they were at home, but they still had all the same tools they would have normally with their actual computers, and they were just at home with remote desktop on one computer and a Skype machine over here, maybe kind of like I'm doing here tonight. And so that's how we did weather. We actually did sports that way too, because sports wasn't allowed in the building. So we took the sports show on the road for 10 weeks. We took it on the road, and we actually streamed the games live on YouTube. We picked the game of the week, and we broadcast that game on YouTube because you had a limited number of people who could come, but you didn't have a whole lot. So we would broadcast the game on YouTube, and then we would do our football game show from that location, and it would be basically via microwave or whatever it was. It was always microwave. And then we would actually have a Skype call for return video, and when we had a Skype call for prompter, because when you're doing football sports like that in a highlight show, you got a bunch of names and stats to worry about, and so they put it all on the computer remotely, and then the prompter would be played back at the studio, be sent via Skype to a tablet that the field anchor was reading off of, and so that's how he got his live prompter, live highlights, and was live via microwave. So the picture quality was great, and then we just used Skype with their lower quality feeds to go, in the back channels again, and then he heard the show via a cell phone call to the studio. So he was, it was a big setup. I mean, we had a camera and then 2 Skype machines and an IFB. Hi, hon. My wife just came home. She's over here. So that hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, I mean, COVID was a challenge in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways we were ready to go. It was kind of shocking how, it was different, and we had a lot of challenges, but we kicked 100 and some people out of the building in like 3 days. It was pretty interesting, and we didn't really suffer that much on air for it. Producers produced from home. A lot of remote desktop sessions. I spun up virtual machines so that people could remote into them because they only had personal computers at home. So they would remote desktop into a work machine that had all the right software to do our newscast. So we had 7, I think it was, remote machines set up for producers to use and talent. And so Yeah, COVID was interesting. HughesNet, that was the one I'm thinking of. HughesNet was the DirecTV one, and I've been told that's horrible, so I don't know. Starlink is reportedly yes. I've heard the speeds are tanking and the latency is a problem because even though they're not in geostationary orbit, it's still a satellite, and you still got to go out to space and come back, and then hop on a fiber to go back to the internet. So it's yeah, I mean satellite's cool, but it's got its limitations. There's a Skynet one, yeah. Yes, every news station listens to scanners for the breaking news, whatever's happening now. A lot of things come in via tip these days. We have a tip line you can text or call, and so, but yes, police scanners are definitely used by newsrooms across the country. Uh, yeah, I mean, so yeah, we actually, that was actually one of the things we used during COVID is because nobody was in the newsroom. We used, is it Broadcastify? I think it is Broadcastify. I think. To listen to scanners because nobody was actually, we didn't have scanners to send home. So during COVID, they used those. Yeah, there's definitely encryption going on now, but I believe public radio or public broadcaster, most of them are still public or should be. Um, I think we got, did we get a radio from, we got a radio from somebody so we could follow along. Not the encrypted channels, but basically we have their iRadio because they're on some kind of trunking system and it's weird for scanners. So you have to be on the same system they use that does trunking, where they can change the channels and moves around. So if you are really into scanners, look up that because you might need a radio that does trunking. My dad worked for Westinghouse. Wow. um, that must be interesting to have your dad work in that. Yes, Keith, the world wants to know, did you ever pull the string? Oh, Joe wants to see Puka. Can you bring her here?
Yeah.
Oh, you're okay. Your radio does do the trunking.
Well, your microphone, that's cool.
So this is my wife Haley, and
Hi.
this is our dog Puka. She is a 10-pound Chihuahua pug. We've had her for 11 years now.
Most. October.
Almost 11 years.
Yeah.
Come here, Pooks. Be internet famous, Pooks. Look at the camera. She is not interested in the camera. Yeah, there we go. Good.
Puka. Yeah, my doggy.
So that's our little dog Puka. Oh, Ashley says hi. Ashley Trelly.
Hi, Ashley. I miss you guys.
So anyway, now that I think it looks like everyone's kind of dwindling down their questions, and wow, we've been streaming for an hour and a half. I can't believe I talked that long.
I sure can.
Oh, Haley says that she can believe that. So anyway, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I appreciate you all being here. This was definitely fun. I definitely have a to-do list for the next one. And, oh, Ashley Trelly is in the chat. And she says hi, Puka and Haley.
Tell her hi for me.
She says hi back. She's in another room with Puka. So, anyway, again, I want to thank you for watching. And don't forget to click the like button or comment down below afterwards because that'll help the algorithm. And I want to thank you for hanging out with me tonight. Have a good night.